Tribes of Midgard is a different beast, up to 10-person survival game with a bit of Minecraft in there for building, a bit of Diablo for your fighting, and assuredly a bit of Don't Starve in there for, well, your Don't Starving. And then shove some Viking mythos up in it, and coming out on July 27th. It's a third-person isometric survival game with a Viking theme that allows for, like I said, up to 10 people to play together. If someone had said that a game where you and a bunch of friends become Arbor Day warriors, and it would be one of the most liked and looked forward to titles, I would have said, yeah, probably, just because games are offering so many different options now. It's very cool. Now, I got this code from the devs who are nice enough to supply me one. Of course, you know what that means. I'm going to buy a game and gift it to someone so that my money is on the line just like yours. As always, if you like this video, check out the review for Microsoft Flight Sim or any of the other videos I've done, and especially stay tuned for this week. Ton of different titles coming out. Subscribe if you like it. So here we go. Review in progress for Tribes. Graphically, it's sort of an artful Diablo. It's got a cinematically Viking twist, that's for sure. It's got hyper-colored 2D and 3D art, and in the team's words, to create the brightest Ragnarok ever seen. And I think they did it, that is for sure. At times, the cheeriest looking death zone you will probably ever see. While I love that art style and the color choice, I will say that the mixing of the viewpoint with 3D and 2D, as well as randomly generated terrain, can get a bit hard on the eyes, just the way they've set the world up. Terrain-wise, it's built in a blocky form, resulting at times where it looks like a much older title and far less organic than almost everything else in the game actually does. It's like, hey man, look how cool I look swinging this sword and casting this spell, and then you run by a square block on top of a square block that looks a little bit like a high-res Genesis game, and you realize you need to climb up there, which results in you running around in circles until you find a rock ramp or you make your own, and then you find a branch up there. It's an odd dichotomy that isn't lost on me no matter how many times that's going to happen either. Now, weapons, armor, as well as locations show various environmental hazards that look their part. They do a pretty good job of informing you of what may lay ahead, and it brings that package together solidly. What doesn't, though, are the enemies. While the game has various enemies, different normal level characters that you're going to face, enemies of various types from goblins to other humanoids all seem to lack a bit of scaling properly. Now, whether that's to make the giants in the game that attack you once every couple days seem even more impressive, I'm not quite sure. But some of them are so small and diminutive that picking them apart from the background can actually be quite difficult. And while you can zoom way in, the game offers no rotation ability that I could find. So either you zoom in, you lose a lot of that peripheral, or you keep zoomed out, and it's just a little bit difficult to parse graphically. And that'll bring us to the giants, who are basically like cowards. They look like one thing, but they're something else. For example, at first they look mightily impressive, and then you realize they're pretty underachieving as bad guys. First, they're so tall, the game is like, hey man, here's another zoom level for you, and I love that. It felt like that crap moment when a character in a movie looks up and then up and then up and then up some more to see the bad guy. But then, unfortunately, all the giants that I've faced so far have been absolutely bland-tastic in their attacks. They stop, or they stab, or they stomp the ground in super slow motion, and their looks are almost untextured compared to everyone or everything else. They just don't look artistically that interesting. Of course, when they jump into your village and they start attacking your world tree, they have a cool spell to do so, and I did like that look. But overall, experiencing them in the wilderness, not so impressive. Also, it's noticeable that the hitboxes for fighting the giants are not great. For hitting them, it's pretty wide open, but for their attacks, you may think, oh shit, I can't go anywhere where the game is showing fire or some other elemental result of the giant tacking that ground, but many times you can. In fact, at times, it's really hard to tell why you're getting hurt, and you could run around and sometimes they'd attack and do no damage, and then at other times, the damage was coming off of me as I was just near their feet, most likely some kind of damage resulting in movement of them against me, but it was still very odd. A patch is coming, so I'm going to assume that's one of the parts in there. When it comes into the graphical options you can jump in, there's a couple, from texture detail to shadow resolution and so forth. It's not a ton, but the game ran really well, even with all those settings on Epic anyway, at 4K with a 2080 Ti, well above 60 FPS with tons of characters on the screen doing all kinds of magics. More options would have been very nice, but so far it hasn't really seemed like it's going to need a ton of different options for you to gain any FPS back. As a package, I love the art style, I love the armor and the weapons and the way they looked, but Tribes doesn't exactly come together very well. While creating my own ramp to access a second level location was awesome, the hitboxes, the lackluster giants, the way that they attacked, and just the way that everything interacted sort of felt disconnected in different places and connected in others. That brings us to sound, music, and voice.
Eftur furman nureika, Godar hedur said Yggdrasil i alla Midgarder. Ryskathur steja heim drej ein dagor vikamir.
And speaking about sound first, hey, it's got some nice battle sounds, some nice spell effects and collision sounds when you're smashing sword against head. While the environments don't exactly impress in their offerings much, especially for enclosing the game into the environment, they don't detract as well. There's not a lot of effects processing. I would say that's on the lean side when it comes to locations. Overall, it still works for what you're doing, especially when you get a bunch of different characters on screen. That brings us to music. So you're going to hear more about this from me as I move on. It seems lean, and I'll be honest, a lot of the time you're just fighting off bad guys and worried about other things. And because so many actions and so many timers overlap themselves, which I'll talk about in the gameplay, having a particular track maybe indicate a particular thing going on in the game world is not as easy as it would, let's say, a stinger in any other game. So far, the music hasn't necessarily grabbed me. There's been a couple tracks I've heard and I liked the main menu music. It just really hasn't stuck with me as I continue to play it. And that'll bring us to voice. So there isn't a ton. Some interactions and cutscenes at the starting sets the ideals for the story. Then when you leap in, most of the game is silent aside from your teammates or the occasional one-liner from the sad SOBs that have been stuck in the world's worst base with you. Literally, the world's worst base. This base was built by someone who hates Vikings for sure. It's got 3 open gates and 4 sides. That's really bad math and really bad design right from the start. I do like the made up / somewhat realistic voice and language that they use though. And that brings us to gameplay. The game starts out with a tutorial. This is a DNA kind of story cutscene that sets everything up, offering you the information that you're going to need and setting up the basic storyline, which is that you're going to live inside of a compound, have a living tree inside until such time as you smote the enemies and then ride the Bifrost back home. Currently, there's a tutorial, a saga mode, which is like a long story kind of mission mode, and a survival mode, which has you making your own world by choosing some parameters. You can set it as private or public and seeing who can live the longest there. Survival mode unlocks at 3rd level, FYI. Now, the tutorial walks you through the basics like fighting, which is light attacks for each weapon that build up the specials, which are your strong attacks, as well as defending if you have a shield, bow and arrow if you choose that, how to scrounge around the countryside for rocks and berries and sticks, and then take them home to build an axe. So you can go out and chop down a bigger stick so you can make more sticks by whittling that down. And the tutorial teaches you about how the game progresses, which is basically a series of threats as you or your tribe try to defend the village as well as collect to upgrade it and take out the giants that come thrashing down and smashing down as Ragnarok itself actually encroaches. It's a survival game through and through and built on those core concepts more than a combat game, which would solidly sit as the secondary genre of the two. So be aware of that. You go into the land, you collect items, you get recipes, and you build up your small base by upgrading your people in the base if you choose to, which not only upgrades their items that they sell, but their ability to fight at night, which helps when the enemies attack, or once every couple days when a giant attacks. Tribes does a couple things incredibly well and a little bit unique. I love that you upgrade their ability to attack. You can make an arrow tower as you want in a tower defense game sort of situation. Nothing has just one way to be done though. You can also ignore both of those and just upgrade your own weapons and armor and buy more and more equipment by upgrading the weapons or armor makers. And you can become the person who kills everybody. Also, they've decided here that when you scrounge around for items or forage, you also get money. This removes any desire, well, not completely removes it, but greatly, to sell anything. You get souls for just killing enemies or just mining some rock. Those souls upgrade or buy everything else, or they can be injected into the tree in your village, raising its hit points for when it gets attacked. As you do all this, you also get experience points as you raise levels and kill your first giant, and you can then open up your classes. The first 2 classes are not exactly awe-inspiring, but the more giants you kill and the more situations that you get in will unlock various different ones. Each has their own skill tree as well, and those skills are unlocked. I can tell you this though, those are not good skills, especially as you will be trapped, at least until you grind some levels, in those first 2 or maybe 3 classes. God, basically they're just a couple pluses to damages, another mana bar, the ability to leap off things without hurting yourself, and some other bits to your combos. As you go up in levels, you do unlock some starting default outfits, like Villager, who has an armor, or a Forger with tools and such. That can alleviate at least a small part of that first process of the game, which I gotta admit, as I continue to play it, became a bit of a drag. Luckily, as you're battling, you're taking out enemies, you're occasionally finding these runes that are going to drop. They're super powerful drops that you can carry with you, a couple of them. They change a good deal about how the way the game feels. Perhaps doing 20% more damage to enemies or resurrecting with some of your items remaining, because normally when you die and respawn, you have to do a corpse run. Here, you can sometimes respawn, at least with some of the souls still remaining in your pocket. You also have the construction element of this game. I want to make sure this is clear. You have a base, and you may think to yourself, this is the worst base ever. You can reinforce it, though. You can put gates that slow the enemies down who come to attack you, or even build walls or other things, not only in the city, but in many places, allowing for you to get to a higher level in a location. This is also needed to get to the last boss in the Saga location. It's a bit like Fortnite. Switch into build mode and lay down any parts that you found or created back home. You can also find locations in the game world that can be repaired, like farms. That's one of the best parts of the game, is that there's a lot of various different ways you can do things. Or you could just say that a lot of systems are overlapping. World Tree, World Smashing Giants. The game does need a name for a world clock, though, because there's a lot of timing in the essence of Tribes. Want to see farther off locations? Then you need to find fast teleports to quickly travel back, as you need to go back for every time the enemies attack. But you also need to get souls to level up everything, which also means more fighting. But then you can also gather items to create things. You can see why one group of people is going to be better than one person. Then a giant drops in and creates a slower but overlapping countdown with a day-night cycle attack that's already going on. And then a stag drops in that you can go and tame and get awesome treasure from. Unfortunately, that's another timer, and a lot of times they seem to be on the opposite side of the map. But that's not all, because there's another timer which is counting down to true Ragnarok and changing the temperature, which means every single night enemies' attacks actually get just a little bit longer, which means just a little bit more resources to fight, which means just a little bit more of a reason to upgrade somebody or build that tower in there. However, with all this good stuff and all of these unique gameplay systems, there are some oddities that do not balance very well so far. For instance, making an axe is a couple pieces of wood and a piece of flint. Repairing one is like 80 souls. Well, that makes sense in a risk versus reward, as well as resources being extinguished around your base kind of way. The oddity is that the cost actually only felt balanced in a very small subsection of the game at a very particular level with a very particular amount of resources around the base. Otherwise, it really didn't make a lot of sense. Also, weapon durability. While it can be increased with skills later on, it is still pretty short. This, of course, is balanced depending on how many characters you end up bringing in with you, other players, as well as something that can be patched or tweaked as the game continues to release. It's called Tribes of Midgard for a reason. It's not Dude Midgard or Dudette of Midgard, because the game is also pretty damn difficult by yourself after you go up a couple levels. And I was warned about that when I got it, and I sort of liked the idea. They told me that there was no ability to join up with others unless it was the developers. And I'm not 100% sure why, but they said at this time matchmaking was not working. I got to the 7th day one time, which I felt really good about when I was by myself. First night usually goes quite easily. So you go back out scouting. Maybe you find a fast travel location. You're lucky. That's cool, as you only have a timed one that you can use as a stone that you have in your pack, but it just works to take you back. You clear out an enemy base, maybe you find a precious chest marked precious, and you think, this is gonna be so good. And it drops a fucking ramp. I don't care what world you're in, ramp is never precious. No one has ever said in this world, ever, in any world, man, thank God I have this fucking ramp. Whatever. The good stuff about this, I love that the game is constantly pushing and pulling you in different ways. I've felt a bit heavy-handed here and there, but so far it's actually kept me interested. The way they overlap these things, like getting money for gathering items and those items, and the way it all works together, that helps everything move a little bit smoother. Leveling up your people in town not only changes their weapons and what they sell you, but makes them stronger in combat, which again is awesome. How many times has that goddamn blacksmith in a city died because he didn't know how to swing that hammer at a dude's head versus a piece of metal? That feeling of job election you're going to have, and you're going to find yourself in groups and saying, you know what, you stay behind and you guard the village while we go out here. Then you realize at the time that staying behind sucks donkey balls, as well as maybe being told that you're the one who has to go chop down trees. But hey, it's a team effort. I think what ultimately feels a little bit off in this game is that all the parts don't necessarily seem fully cooked. Combat's fun. It's a couple different weapon types with lots of weapons in there that you can get with elemental damages, and they can help you take out giants even faster. But the combat itself, not very detailed. And the skills, not either. Construction is sort of cool, but it's also not as useful as you might think until later when it seems like it's almost required. But by then, you probably just wanted to outfit your archer stations with some arrows, and almost anything you can construct away from your base also seems a bit of a waste to do so far. Balancing, not in damages, but in things like the repair costs and the loadouts for the items. They just really weren't super enticing. Lastly, the game does have microtransactions in a way. You can buy coins, which do let you get some customizables in the game. There's a store that doesn't have a lot of stuff right now, which seems almost even weirder to have the microtransaction money in there. But as the full game rolls out, maybe there'll be a great deal more. I don't know. There is two currencies. There's basically coin and horns you get from killing the giants. I played for hours and didn't get to level 10, and there's like 50 or 60 levels. So there is for sure a lot of upgrading that you can do in the game, at least with the unlocks you get per level, not necessarily so much with that core gameplay. Fun factor. Tribes is fun, even in solo. It is. It's very fun. I found that while upgrading the towers and outfitting them helped a little, upgrading the characters in the village helped a huge amount. I'm just going to say that's sort of a shortcut. I love that feeling. It feels good to explore, too. I found a stag. I got the items from them, a high-tailed home before the evil creature tried to make it their own, and add that cool feeling of just-in-fucking-timeness that you get in games like that. However, I can't say the beginning parts of the game are that enjoyable after like the first couple times. All survival games are like that. To put it this way, when restarting in Valheim or other survival games, it's never really bothered me so much. Here it felt a bit samey already. Even if you switch from upgrading your potion master versus finding the world tree and feeding it directly the souls or making a bunch of walls to stop the enemies, it started to feel samey already. Even with a new class that I switched out, I went to the ranger and started doing their stuff. It's, I don't know, there's a lot of repeating going on there. Again, this is a review in progress. Those things can absolutely change. There is a lot of fun to be had, and I had a good amount of fun with what I'm doing so far, but there are enough issues that with Tribes, I'm certainly taking a more wait and see kind of approach. So anyway, that's it for me. Hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Check out Patreon and check out the other videos I'm doing. It would absolutely help. Peace out.